Welcome to Two Women Who Give a Puck. My name is Sarah,
And I'm Tara.
and we are here to highlight the experience of females in hockey, both players and coaches, as well as to provide tangible action items to create a more positive experience in that space. And today, it's going to be an interesting conversation for all of you watching on video. You can see I am wearing my What the Puck sweatshirt because this episode is definitely a What the Puck conversation.
Yep.
So, what we are talking about today, kind of our What the Puck moment, is we are going to be sharing a story, a true story from a Minnesota female hockey coach, a woman who has spent years pouring herself into the sport, into her players, and into her community, only to wake up one day and realize that the ice beneath her feet wasn't as solid as she thought. So, she didn't want to come onto the podcast herself, not because she's afraid or not because she isn't strong enough, but because coaching still matters to her. And the kids that she coaches still matter to her, and her community still matters to her. So today she has asked us to share her story for her. Once you hear the story, I think you'll understand why she didn't personally want to be on the podcast herself. So if you're listening online, one, you get to see my lovely What the Puck sweatshirt. And then two, you'll notice that both Tara and I have notes in front of us. And because it's not our story and we want to do it justice, we are going to be reading more often than we normally would. So online, you'll see us referencing our notes, reading from our notes. And if you aren't watching us on video, but you're listening to the podcast, it will sound a bit less conversational today because we want to get her story right. And why we want to get her story right is because it's not just a one bad situation type of story.
Correct.
So this is a pattern, and her goal in sharing this story is simple. She wants to let other female coaches know that they're not alone and to encourage hockey associations to do better. So after going through this experience, she realized staying silent only protects the system that hurt her. And she didn't want to do that. She wanted other women and other female hockey coaches to feel seen. So this story isn't about exposing her association or calling out individuals. It's about showing what is happening quietly, repeatedly, and often without consequences, even in Minnesota, which is the so-called state of hockey. So you would think that Minnesota would be a bit more advanced than the rest of the nation. But this story takes place in Minnesota, the state of hockey. And the truth is, female coaches being mistrusted, undersupported, or pushed out of head coaching roles is not rare. It is disturbingly common.
Addition to this story, we did have several people reach out to us with very similar stories or very similar situations of not feeling welcomed or being flat out told they weren't welcome.
Right.
Particularly as teams were formed and associations, invited people to coach and not coach, and it was a little bit eye opening for me. The number of people that reached out.
Yeah. There felt like there was an extra amount of stress in the hockey world.
Yeah.
this season, for whatever reason. And so that, yes, is another reason why we want to share a story. While the details are unique, I think the feelings are common.
Yeah, they're pretty universal. Little background. So this individual, she played high school hockey and college hockey, and she has maintained a presence in the hockey community, playing and coaching since college. She has been the head coach for her daughter's team for her daughter's entire hockey career. Not only was she the head coach, but her daughter's teams were consistently successful in the ways that you want them to be. So, they weren't blowing everyone out of the water, but kids were improving, strong team character. They developed good skills. They were having fun, all the things you'd want from a coach. She'd always gotten positive feedback from parents, other coaches, year-end surveys. So in her mind, she was doing a good job, and she was, meeting the expectations that the association had laid out for her. And, it's fair to say, though, no coaches universally love. That just isn't a thing. There's always someone that's got a problem. And, that was probably her case as well, where there was one or two parents that, didn't necessarily agree with her style or her approach. But that's normal, whether you're male, female, or or the sport. Doesn't matter if it's just hockey, right?
Yep.
Biggest surprise, but there was never any feedback indicating she didn't meet expectations. So in her role as a coach, she felt that she was in a safe place, she felt valued, she felt like she belonged, and no one had ever told her or given her any reason to think otherwise for those things. So the vast majority of the messages she were hearing were acceptance and appreciation and not anything that would indicate that there was an issue with what she was doing.
So fast forward to this year, so this season, her daughter had tryouts. She was at a level where tryouts were happening. And so after her daughter's last night of tryouts, they both drove home expecting that she would get a call like she had gotten every year, asking, like, hey, do you want to be the head coach to your daughter's team? But this year, the call never came. So, minutes passed, hours passed. She was starting to really question, like, what is going on, refreshing the page, like, still nothing. And then after refreshing the page, so I think many parents and players know that feeling of
Oh, yes.
tryout nights where it's like they post the teams online. And so you're just sitting there refreshing the page every, 5 seconds, telling yourself you're going to wait 5 minutes,
Yep.
but then you can only wait 30 seconds. And so you're refreshing.
Yep.
And so she did that, kept doing that, still thinking like, okay, maybe I'll still get the call. Teams haven't been posted yet. But then on, that last refresh, the teams have been posted. And that is when she saw that she was not the head coach. And instead of her being the head coach, it was a man who had never played hockey, a man who had very limited head coaching experience. And that man was now in the position that she had felt like she had earned for years. Her daughter saw this at the same time that she saw this, and her daughter looked up at her and asked her the question, Mommy, why aren't you the head coach? And the only answer she had was, I don't know.
Yep. So it was in that moment when she was talking to her daughter that something inside of her cracked. Because it wasn't about her anymore. It was about girls and what girls were learning. So in this case, it was a woman with experience, both as a player and as a coach, who was being replaced by a man who didn't have that experience and without any reason that would make sense to anybody on the surface. And so then you have to start thinking about, what does this teach our girls that are watching these situations play out? What are they learning about leadership, about worth, about who belongs in hockey, about who can be trusted? We preach leadership, but then we're not acting that way when we're taking a woman who's been a leader consistently, successfully, and replacing her for no known reason with somebody that is, regardless of what kind of human being they are not experienced and they are not as qualified for that same role. So asking a little girl or a team of little girls to make sense of that is not an easy task. So obviously she was going to be confused about what was happening. I can speak to this myself because I've been in similar situations. Like, you don't sleep, you're anxious, your emotions are all over the place. And that was the case with her as well. She thought about every practice, every game, every conversation, trying to find, like, what is the one thing that happened, or what are the things that happened that got us in this situation. And when she couldn't find anything in her own self-reflection, she decided to reach out for answers because she just wanted to understand how a decision like that is made, who makes that decision, and how can we speak to that decision to our girls in a way that makes sense to them.
Mm-hmm. So I just want to jump in and say, female coaches, like, I think this is an important piece to make sure that you are reaching out, because so many of the female coaches that we talk to who were in similar situations, like, they never got an answer. The board never proactively gave them an answer. You need to reach out to get that feedback.
Yep.
Back yourself. And I think it is important to get that feedback and to understand why, because we coaches are very passionate individuals. And so if there is ever a time where someone is, chosen instead of us, then, it's important to get that feedback.
Yep.
And ask for those answers. I think every coach deserves those answers. So she did reach out to the coaching director, and we're going to keep this kind of high level. We're not going to go into the specific details, but essentially it was that the board wanted a different voice. They doubted her abilities, and they believed that the players would develop more under someone else. So even if that someone else never played hockey. The board felt like that coach would be a better option than her. And then, so here's the funny part, when she was telling us about this, is that when she heard the feedback that, essentially it was, they believed she was an incompetent coach, that
Yep.
she actually was relieved because she was just assumed it was so much worse.
Yep.
And that it had to be something,
She did
so
or
yeah,
not.
that she
Yep.
did that was so terrible. And when she got that feedback, like, it almost made her laugh because, most female coaches, they deal with that pretty much every year. And
Oh,
we've
yeah.
talked
Yep.
about that on this podcast before, where the assumption of incompetence is a yearly
Yep.
hole that, we have to dig ourselves out of. So it kind of made her laugh that, like, oh, okay, that's it. Sweet. We can get past this.
Yep.
But that just, is proof with how normalized it is for us female coaches to be viewed as incompetent, that, like, it didn't surprise her that
Yeah.
it's like, oh, okay, I've gotten that before. Like, it's never been this extreme where,
Yeah.
I've
It's,
been
it's not like the guys where they just show up and you have to prove your incompetence. It's the opposite for females.
right. Yeah. So female coaches are kind of used to that.
Yep.
Good. Well, not good. I was gonna say good or bad, but there's
too
no good.
just bad. Just bad.
So even though she felt relief to find out that it was just the good old incompetence excuse, she still felt an immense amount of pain, frustration, and misunderstanding because, kind of what we talked about when we went over the background of the situation, or the background of her playing and coaching. It's like she is a good coach.
Yep.
Like, she's not perfect, she's not flawless, but she's a good, experienced coach who's trusted by or felt trusted by the people who actually saw her on the ice and were a part of her teams. And yeah, losing everything she had built suddenly, quietly, without warning, was incredibly devastating.
Yeah.
And she said walking onto the ice as an assistant coach for the first time this season, she felt like she was walking into a funeral. There was a lot of grief and a lot of emotion, and she was just trying to hold herself together, which seems a bit dramatic maybe to
No,
people who haven't been a coach before, but
but it's hard. It's very hard.
yeah.
Yeah.
And she found herself resenting the sport that she loved. Like, she
Yeah.
hated hockey. This was happening at the time that the NHL season was beginning, and so she turned the Wild game on, the first game of the season, and she didn't want to watch it. She didn't even want to look at the TV. Like, she just hated hockey.
Yep.
In that moment.
Yeah.
And that's what trauma does. It takes something you love and makes you afraid to touch it. Like, she was struggling. She went through the cycles of grief multiple times over the course of the next few days and weeks after it happened. And even a month or so into the season, she's still struggling.
Yeah.
So she felt safe within her association. She did not see this coming at all. It came out of left field. And, she's listened to our podcast before. She's in other female hockey coaches groups. And so she's heard of this type of thing happening to other female coaches. But she truly, honestly felt safe within her association. She had felt like she had earned the trust of her players, her parents, the decision makers within the association, that she really didn't think that this would happen to her.
I think that's the hardest part for all of us to listen. I say all of us females to listen to in that story is, when is it my turn? Like, that.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's what you think is like, when is it going to be me, for no good reason other than, I mean, I'm sure we know there's a good reason.
Right.
There is
Right.
a good reason. But that, seeing these things happen and listening to these stories, it does make you question. And, we've talked to other people about this story, including some of our past guests, and they unfortunately are not surprised. They're like, yep, it will happen.
Yeah.
Maybe not to you, but it's going to happen to someone else again. That's why we're here.
Right.
Yep.
Well, and it just makes it so hard to want to continue coaching.
Yeah. Oh,
Like,
sure.
when you feel like there's kind of a ticking time bomb, and
Yep.
it doesn't feel like anything you do will be enough.
Yeah. So after all of this happened, she started to reach out to her community in hockey that she'd worked on building. And in our previous podcast, we've talked about the importance of building those communities and um, having people that you can talk to and people that are supportive and people that are going to give you honest feedback and in a supportive way. And after going through that situation, she, emphasizes that it really is important, and it's important to have a community of both female and male advocates that are available to you for when things are challenging, whether it's a situation like this or something else on your team. She also reached out to some fellow hockey coaches within her association and learned that one of them had had a similar experience, and she was replaced as the head coach with zero warning and never really relieved an explanation either. And then that led her to reach out to us because we give a puck.
We do give a puck. In what
What
the
the
puck
puck.
situations
Yep.
we give a puck.
Yep. And then because of some of the resources that we shared, she was able to reach out to one of our or two of our previous guests also. And like we just said, they weren't surprised that this is a situation that has happened. And they've seen it multiple times. They have seen it in Minnesota. They've seen it elsewhere in the country. They have seen it different teams, different sports. Same thing, right? It's a pattern that keeps repeating, and there's no good reason for it.
Exactly.
So we're here to talk about it.
Right.
This individual reached out to Chris Swing and Ashley Holmes, who, like I said, are previous podcast guests of ours, and asked for some advice. Their best piece of advice was to ask for feedback. The way that they suggested giving feedback was in a professional, non-confrontational way, by saying something along the lines of like, coaching matters deeply to me. I want to grow. I want to improve. Can you tell me why someone else was chosen? And that's really important. And
Mhm.
we've talked about that with other guests. When our coaching director, Dan Miller, was here, we had that conversation with him about how important it is for people to get feedback, whether it's positive or negative, to help them grow as coaches. Like what's working, what's not working, what changes do we need to make, or what things do we need to make sure we're not changing because they seem to be having a positive impact.
Right. And I think, like,
Yeah.
every good coach does that feedback loop constantly. Like
Yep.
every practice, every game. Like that's how they kind of have trained themselves. Like, okay, what's working, what isn't working, whether it's a drill or whether it's a game that doesn't go well. They're always analyzing what's working and what isn't, because that's the kind of the purpose of coaching, is to see where your players are at in the moment and know where you want to get them, and then figure out which pieces they're missing.
Right.
So I think that's why, it's not like you're going to offend a coach or a good coach with feedback, positive or negative.
No.
But if they're not receiving anything,
Yep.
then they're not going to know
Yep.
that things aren't going well, and they're not going to be able to learn and grow from a situation.
100%. This individual also decided to dig a little deeper. She went back and she looked at the players she's coached and the players in her association that are of her age level, and reached out to families. And the data that she gathered told a different story than what the board had shared for their reasoning. And so I think the important part of that is, don't be afraid to ask questions, because you want to make sure you're getting the real story, the real facts. Don't be afraid to talk to families, because if you've developed this community, hopefully you can ask them those questions. Like, is there something I should have done different? Is there something that your daughter would like to have seen different? Is there something that worked well for your daughter? You're just getting more background information on how they perceived you as a coach and how maybe that information was shared with other people.
Mm-hmm.
You can talk to other assistant coaches that you maybe have worked with, and what worked, what didn't work. That same sort of feedback loop we were just talking about. And in this case, the narrative was not matching reality. And I have a sneaking suspicion that's generally the case when we're talking about coaches being replaced without good cause or good reason.
Without foresight or feedback or
Yeah.
anything. Yeah. Yeah. It may just be kind of some hearsay
Right.
that just kind of ran wild. And so that's, an important piece too. Those decision makers, like really making sure that
Yeah.
that you're also
Well,
doing this as well.
this didn't just disrupt this coach. It disrupted all of the players that were expecting her to be their coach. And not every, like I said, not every player is going to love every coach, but there was probably a handful of players that were looking forward to being coached by this individual again. But a lot of those players, if they've played for her in the past, they have expectations of how the season's going to go. They feel comfortable coming to practice and games because they know what the expectations are, and they feel comfortable growing, and they feel comfortable practicing and failing and doing all these things in that space. And now all of a sudden they're having to readjust and recalibrate last minute and with no indication ahead of time that that might be the case. And I understand, like, part of sports is teaching kids to be resilient and whatever, but these are also, anytime you're talking about travel hockey, you're talking about a kid from anywhere from 10 to 16, 17, 18. There's a lot of emotions and hormones and stuff happening then. Like, it's hard. And sometimes, especially in the situations like this where you can't explain it,
Mhm.
then I think it's even harder for some of the kids to, like, wrap their head around why things are happening, or dealing with feelings of unfairness or feelings of confusion when there's not a reasonable answer.
Right.
So that being said, like, a board isn't, once they made a decision, they're not gonna change it unless there's an immense amount of peer pressure. They're not gonna change it, but they're probably also not gonna reflect on it, right? They're not
Mhm.
gonna go back and be like, "Oh, we shouldn't have done that. You're right."
If they've made this decision, they feel like they're right, and
Yep.
they're gonna move on.
Yep.
But, the individuals involved who the decision was made about probably are gonna have a harder time moving on.
Yep. And so I think the important thing is, like, just keep advocating for yourself, right? Like, it's gonna be uncomfortable, it's gonna be hard, you're gonna feel like you're out there by yourself, but that's the only thing that's gonna get these type of situations to not happen in the future, is if we continue to call them out, because no one wants to be called out, right?
Right.
People are gonna do things that they know they're gonna get away with, not so if they are called out for these poor choices, if are called out for things that look, you know, even on a deep level, that look sexist, like, they're gonna stop doing those things, we hope, right? So,
Right.
and females in hockey are easy targets, right? They're different. They have to prove themselves to start with, and so to a lot of people, they don't look like hockey players, or they don't look like they would have the ability and the knowledge and the skill to coach or to play at a high level, because they just aren't, they've never seen it before. They haven't been around it enough to understand that that's a normal thing. And it's easier to convince people who have never coached with a female on the ice with her. It's easier for them to believe that that person doesn't know what they're doing,
Mhm.
and it's easier for other parents to tell that same story. And so it's important that we have people that continue to step up and call out those things, because that's the only way you're going to break that cycle.
Right. Right.
If you find yourself, or you find somebody in that situation, really think, like, really try to dig deeper and figure out what the true story is. Try and make sure that the board members know that you see it, it's not okay, that you expect better of them. They're voted in, they can be voted out, right? Like, these we have to do better for our kids, and we're making decisions that are not in the best interest of the kids. I know when we were discussing this story, the thing that popped into my head first was, after the ridiculousness of it all, it was, but why is it okay that we're giving girls a less qualified coach? We would never do this to a boys team.
Right.
And there is no reason. They don't deserve anything different than what the boys get. And we would never take somebody who's never coached or never played hockey and put them in charge of a travel hockey team.
Right.
We'd never do that. And so why is it okay that we're doing it to our little girls?
Right.
So, like, we need people to continue to advocate for both the female coaches and for the female players.
Yeah. Unfortunately, yes, in 2025, we still
Yes.
need to do that.
Yep. And so, to boards and associations and decision makers, one thing that we as podcasts and our individual that's sharing the story with us would like to have done is imagine that the person you're removing from a coaching position is a male. Imagine, a big, tall, stereotypical looking hockey coach. Are you making that same decision if it's a winning team or players are developing? There's no trauma or drama or chaos involved with past seasons. Would you still remove that individual? And if you have to think about it, the answer is probably no, you wouldn't. And so then why are you removing the female? All you're doing is you make it more difficult for females to coach, but you're also taking away learning opportunities and resources from these little girls. So this year, rather than walking away, she decided to be an assistant coach for the team. And she shared a little bit about that with you.
Yep. Yeah. So she said that more people told her to quit than not. They told her to walk away. They told her to let this new coach sink. Not necessarily to sabotage him, but just to, not help and see what happened, to kind of, prove to the board that this was a bad decision to,
Yeah.
kind of get a win. And walking away would have been a hell of a lot easier.
Yes.
Um,
100% agree.
yes. And I think many, many people would have, decided to walk away, but instead she chose to stay. She chose compassion and empathy. The new head coach didn't create this situation. And that is what she continued to remind herself of. Like, it wasn't his choice. He was placed in it. He didn't feel he could say no. And so she continued to show up for him, for the girls, and for the game that she once loved. I was a bit unsure if she loves anymore, but she obviously is staying. So there's still a bit of love, a love in there. So yeah, she's still there. She's still skating. She's still teaching. She's still giving, and she's still fighting, quietly for a better hockey world. A better hockey world where women don't have to survive this to be considered good enough.
Yep.
And so her story is not comfortable. It's not neat. It isn't tidy. It doesn't end with a victory. But it has a truth, and it's a truth that we can't ignore anymore, that this is happening here. It's happening now in 2025. It's happening in Minnesota to real women in the state of hockey. And if we want a better future for our girls, we have to change the present. Like, we have to change if we don't want this to continue happening. So for everyone, thank you for listening to her story. And to every woman who has been pushed out, dismissed, underestimated, or silenced, we see you, we believe you, and we need you, because hockey is better with you in it. And it always will be.
Yep.
So she chose to continue coaching to help rebuild her confidence, rebuild her relationship with hockey, and rebuild her sense of safety. And by sharing her story with us, she hopes to help create a future where female coaches don't have to fight this hard just to be seen, respected, and valued. So her courage helps open the doors for others. So let's make sure that we don't close it again.
We always say you're not alone. And that's the big takeaway from here is if you have had this experience, or someone has, they are not alone. You are not alone. If you are in a position where you can change this, please do so. If you're a parent that can speak out when you see stuff like this happen, please do it. It's the silence that allows it to continue to happen. Boards, look at your processes for selecting a coach. Are they fair? Do they really truly have the best interests of the players and their development in there? Does it reflect a positive culture? Can we take the personality out of it when we maybe just don't like the person? And not to say that was the situation in this case. Youth sports, there's politics, there always will be. But how is that serving our kids? How is that serving our associations? And so,
and it's youth.
Yeah.
It's youth sports,
right?
Like, it's youth sports, people.
Yep.
Let's remember, what the true mission of youth sports is. I think most organizations, their mission will be that players develop in a fun and supportive environment. And so let's keep that in mind. It's youth sports.
Well, I think the other thing that's really important to point out is youth hockey, unlike a lot of other, pay to play type sports, like some of the AAA clubs and whatever else, but true Minnesota community-based youth hockey, it is run by volunteers. They are not getting paid. They might get a small stipend to, reimburse some of their costs associated with coaching, but they are not getting paid. This isn't a job for them. And so like, I wanna take that off the table because I don't want someone to be like, "Well, they're just missing part of their paycheck." No, that's
No.
these are true volunteers. They're really in it for the game and for the kids, and for their community and not for any sort of paycheck or, any sort of personal gain.
Right. So if you found today's episode meaningful, please share it with someone in your hockey community because truly, like these stories matter
Yep.
and these conversations matter. And these are real events that are happening.
Yep.
And so it's important that, they get shared and that people know that this is happening within our hockey world, within Minnesota, within the state of hockey.
Yep.
So please share.
Also, if you have a story you wanna share, it can be anonymous. I think part of helping people recognize how widespread some of this struggle is, and also helping us find a solution for it, is sharing your story. So if you do wanna share your story with us, please, please, please do. We'd love to hear it. We don't have to share any information. Or if you want to come and talk about your story, we'd love to have you as well. All of our information is on our website. It's on social media.
twowomenwhogiveapuck.com, and then you could email us at twowomenwhogiveapuck@gmail.com. So yes, we could share your story in the same way if you don't personally want to be on the podcast, or come join us in person in studio or online.
And on the flip side, if you have a great story of how advocating has made changes in your association, we would love to hear that as well.
Yes,
So.
because we would love ideas.
Yes. We all want.
Make sure to tune in next week when we will be going over some key takeaways and tangible action items. So to end the podcast, I want to remind all you ladies out there that we belong in hockey and we deserve to be a part of the greatest game in the world.
And don't forget to invite somebody else in.